The saying, better late than never, actually this time might fit better than ever, because obviously once again I'm a little bit late with my review of the Razer Phone 2, but after having used only the Razer Phone 1 on last year's IFA and its magnificently smooth display made me want to review this phone so bad, just so I can actually see if it's more than just this super crazy smooth display. So let's just take a closer look at it now. Let's talk about the design and build quality, starting off with a tour around the phone on its back, which is the main root for my pain in this video, because with all this shiny glass, my new camera and its autofocus have no idea what they are supposed to do, and it's driving me crazy. So I guess this is just as much as the fact that we have to accept as the fact that, well, glassback phones just aren't as grippy as some other ones. They attract more fingerprints and, well, they tend to shatter easier than some other phones out there. But at least in this case here it also allows for wireless charging, and if I'm gonna be honest, I never really had an issue with grip on glassback phones in the first place, but that's just me. But I can't say quite the same thing about those sides, because those are quite slippery. But then again, this phone in the first place isn't all that easy to use or to handle, because it's quite thick, quite boxy, quite bulky, generally big and also heavy, and it's also not quite the ergonomical dream that I would like it to be. Because where I usually complain about the fact that the power button is too high, in this case many people seem to have the issue it being too low. The same goes for the volume rocker. I mean, it kinda makes sense, at least in combination with their own peripherals, so nothing gets blocked. But yeah, for daily use with a phone that's maybe not quite perfect, even though I have to say for me, this position is actually quite natural. And I totally get though that not everyone, especially with bigger hands, thinks the same. But they should think the same about the quality of this fingerprint reader, because it's not the fastest one out there, and it has a little bit of a vibration that I don't like personally so much, but it is one thing, very reliable, so that's good. Otherwise, we have the camera protrusion here that doesn't bother me, but definitely might bother some other ones. Microphone, power buttons here, SD card and SIM card tray, USB-C, and I guess none of you will be surprised that there are no speaker holes, because the speakers are where they are supposed to be, in my opinion, on every phone on the front as a stereo pair. Here we also get the sensors and camera and so on, along with the little bit odd speaker grill that picks up a lot of dirt, so you will constantly have to clean up. There are so much things that go inside, like for example here something is inside already in this review unit along with a dent, and this grill particularly might be the only thing that gets damaged a little bit quicker, because the build quality of this phone in general is really good. It feels solid. I mean, it's a solid block of a phone, absolutely that. Nothing rattles, especially not the power button, but also not the volume rocker. The only thing that I could mention maybe is here the not that smooth transition from the smooth side to the glass. This is a little bit on the rougher edges side. And obviously one thing that many people won't like that much is the design, because as we can see we have a lot of bezel. Not just on the top and bottom, but also on the sides. But I don't think gamers will mind it that much. One thing that we should mention definitely on the back though is the RGB Chroma logo, where you can change all the colors. You can leave it glowing all the time, which might maybe eat up a little bit more battery, but you can also just use it customized for your notifications. I think that's definitely something handy. And let's talk about the display now, and I hope the autofocus won't completely go haywire as it did in my like 100 or let's say 300 failed attempts. So, what do I like about here? First of all, not something special for me, we can change the resolution. I don't know why you would want to. Yeah, maybe save battery life, but if you want a higher resolution display, yeah, here you have it. You can also change the colors, but not really that much, because we can change between natural, boosted and vivid. That's all. I would really wish for a white balance control, because out of the box this display, at least before I got used to it, felt a little bit too warm. Like I said, you will get used to that, but in general it was just that. Otherwise, 60 Hz, 90 Hz and 120 Hz, you should just ignore the previous two ones, because why would you get this phone if not for its main feature, the 120 Hz display that is just mind-blowingly sharp. But if we are talking about the quality, not quite the same, because the first main downside that is just not as good as definitely from OLED display where I'm spoiled of is the black levels, because we have actually quite a lot of IPS glow, and blacks just aren't super deep. They are like super dark grays. So that could have been better. And also the brightness, because with a brightness of max 490 lux on white, I've seen brighter displays. And one thing that they actually could have easily taken more advantage of is the high resolution, because they should have used a thinner font, because this font is quite thick and it's not quite all that subtle, it's not quite as nice. And I've noticed that thinner font makes phones feel perceived sharper. so they kind of lost that advantage. So that I would definitely have to root this phone and change the resolution to the font to take full advantage of this otherwise still pretty nice display. And I have to say, especially about those colors, if you watch movies, colors are actually pretty accurate and pretty nice, and then this display is absolutely great. But also the big thing here is the 120 Hz refresh rate. And for me, it's actually a bigger thing in normal daily use, because this is something that I can translate over in the video. My video is already running in 160 Hz, but 120 is a completely different ballpark. This is just so amazing. And actually I have to say that I didn't see so many games that actually support this feature. I mean, it's nice to have, but for me in daily use, this is a bigger thing than it is actually for the games. So I'm not quite sure if I can go back to 120 to 60, because when I used other 60 Hz phones, they felt like running on 30 or 40 Hz. So going back from this to something lower, that is not that easy. So let's talk about the speakers. And I didn't use full volume on purpose because these speakers can be very loud. We also have the option for Dolby Atmos. We can change here between the different settings and so on. We can even go into more settings in here and change stuff. But I have to say, there is one downside of this very loud speaker system. Many videos just aren't really working all that well. For example, games had no issues. Full maximum volume, not really any distortion. Also, most properly mastered music. But on YouTube, it was so annoying that if I sometimes go even above 60% or 70%, a lot of video just tended to distort heavily. And I really mean heavily. And it went to the degree that it went so annoying that I have to say that some other speakers that can't do it that loud, up to the point where they don't distort, where this one are still distorting. And then if you get away from the distortion, you aren't quite as loud anymore. So the speakers potentially are absolutely phenomenal, but for some reason they distort easier. So I would say 5.5 stars if they don't distort. And if they distort and if it's annoying, maybe like 4.5 stars, because I constantly had to change the volume. Generally as a whole though, because yeah, that's just what it is, 5 stars. And well, the volume jack, here it is, the headphone jack. It's unfortunately not included in the phone, but I have to say this dongle here is actually mighty powerful, because I don't know how good the one on the first one was, but this one is, I mean, quality is absolutely fine, it's really good actually, but the volume, I could easily drive a proper pair of headphones. I'm not talking about earphones, headphones with this one. And just alone for this one, it gets 5 stars. It's still not an LG G5, G7 or V30, V40, but pretty much the best thing if it comes down to dongles. So I was actually pleased, especially just as much from the output. Now about performance, I'm not quite sure what I should even tell you. I mean, this is not just pretty much the best Snapdragon 845 phone, because it's not just running perfectly smooth as you can see here, but it also has the benefit of those 120 Hz, and these just make the difference. And this is actually the first phone, and I actually never thought that I would give a phone 5 gold stars in terms of performance, because I usually said they all use the same chip, so how could one be dramatically better that I could give it that gold star rating? But with the 120 Hz and with the responsiveness and with the fact that they pretty much cut off all the animations, because this is running still on 8.1, this phone doesn't feel super snappy, crazy smooth and fast. It does this just noticeably better than any other phone on the market that I've used so far. So I just have to say it like it is. I'm pretty impressed. I mean, it also generally gets a little bit easier or quicker warm, but that's also, in my opinion, just a sign that the heat dissipation is working. Because if a phone gets warm, it means heat gets away from the phone. That's supposed to work like this, but it doesn't really get hot. Even after 1 hour of an extreme stress test, it didn't get overly super hot. So the cooling seems to work pretty well. The performance is absolutely mind-blowingly bonkers. So let's talk about the battery. Here I have to say a full charge takes about 2 hours, which maybe sounds a lot for a 4000 mAh battery. There are phones that can do this quicker right now, but after about 1 hour you are already at 76%, and that's a good value. About the general battery life that I got, I mean, 13% for 1 hour of YouTube at around 200 lux isn't amazing, but it is an okay value. I mean, that's just average due to the high-res IPS display, which just aren't as efficient. That's an okay value. But in general use, I was actually pretty pleased, because I got about from, I would say, 5 hours to a maximum, if I really use it, actually more than usually, where it just can't use the standard range so much, about 6 hours. So in average, I would say maybe 5 to more like 5.5 hours on data. And on Wi-Fi, I would say like 7 to 8 hours, which is still an actually good value. Standby drain isn't amazing, but well, yeah, that's still Android. So let's talk about the software. And I have to say, this is pretty much a kind of themed stock Android, because we have the stock feed, we have the drawer, we have a pretty typical to the Google Launcher, Launcher with an app drawer, obviously. Settings all also look pretty similar. Like I said, this is unfortunately still running on 8.1. I would like to see what they do with 9, and it should happen at some point. We have some Razer settings here. Let's actually quickly go through some of the settings just so you see them. But usually, we have quick settings. We have an actually quite nice theming engine. Most themes cost, but yeah, that's just that. Display I already showed. Brightness level, we can change nightlight, refresh rate, adaptive brightness. Under advanced, we have sleep, colors, size. Unfortunately, no option to change the font, just the size. Resolution, screensaver, ambient display. The ambient display I didn't like so much because you actually have to pull the phone up way higher, and it then takes quite a long time, so it's just not responsive enough to be really a kind of always on this replacement. In terms of sound, I already showed that we have Dolby Atmos, where we have different presets, so we are covered here actually quite well. Even though I have to say, this is a pretty typical stock Android device, which means we don't get too many options. The pretty typical ones here: storage, accessibility, obviously chroma to adjust the lighting here on the back. As you can see here, it lights up. We could also push up the brightness and also pretty much do whatever we want to in terms of colors. So as you can see here, red, green. So yeah, that's that. Obviously also a lot of gaming centric stuff, because we have Cortex, where you can adjust some CPU settings if you're gaming so it doesn't disturb you, all those kind of things. And a few more things, like for example also the Razer mobile software. Like I said, with this one, leave me maybe a like if you want the review of that one. Pretty nice Bluetooth controller, games, yeah. So yeah, I like the software. It's pretty basic, it's pretty minimal, but it gets the job done. Usually you got the updates from what I've seen already pretty quickly. So let's talk about the camera apps. And I'm going to say apps specifically because the normal app I actually like, because most controls are easily accessible from the right side without having menus, because you can just toggle through them. That is a fact that I just like a lot, as you can see here. Options are pretty typical ones, and it looks like a pretty typical stock Android camera app. All good, it's fine. But if you want better results, use the Pixel cams. For example, this is using the same camera app like the Xiaomi Mi 8. For example, this is the one that looks like the Pixel 3 app. And there is also one that looks more like the 2 app. I pretty much shot all my test samples with this one compared to also the stock camera. So this one just allows for night sight and other things and better bokeh and so on. So just install this one. You could use this all the time, because I didn't see a proper downside to the original one, but a lot of upsides after all. So let's actually talk about those camera qualities, because when it comes to those, I have to say the front camera, it's generally good, and I like the out-of-the-box bokeh quite a lot. But then again, not everything always seemed properly in focus. I usually had one spot of my face not being properly focused, and then there was also the issue that everything seemed to be overexposed and a little bit too flat all the time, which was quite upsetting to see. This also didn't really get improved so much from the Google camera app, so front camera definitely could be improved. Also the video, it's definitely very wobbly because the EIS didn't seem to be a thing here. And one thing that is said in general, that the low light causes the frames to drop quite a lot in video, so that was pretty sad to see. If it comes to low light in general, I have to say it's nothing special. It works out quite good, but it definitely gets noticeably better if you use Gcam, because with night sight pictures got way better, and then it shows the potential that camera has in low light. Out of the box, it was okay. About the main camera, I have to say this. It is an actually pretty decent camera, because it's quite nice and sharp, and with the Google Cam, sometimes the exposure was actually too low, and for this case I would actually say the normal camera works out quite good, and it's a pretty good cam, but it's still far off from flagships. But then again, this is not a flagship phone per se when it comes to camera. This is a flagship gaming phone, and therefore the camera is, I guess, generally more important than maybe on a super budget phone, but not as much as on a flagship, so I get that. So for what it is, the camera is actually more than just decent. I'm fine with that. About the video on the back, no EIS by default, so it was pretty shaky, and therefore I would definitely say go for the Gcam. That one has EIS, so it gets stabilized quite nice. Quality was good. The autofocus was a little bit on the shaky side, but generally was absolutely usable. So yeah, once again, as a whole, use the G cam. I mean, the out of the box cam is okay, but I mean, this is also a phone for geeks. And geeks, well, they usually have no issues with installing like third-party apps, especially for the cameras, if they kind of put much effort into those qualities. And about the microphone quality, I have to say it's quite clean, but it could be richer and it's a little bit on the lower volume side. But that's that pretty much about the camera. So let's get into the conclusion. Okay, so then what's my final conclusion? Well, as expected, obviously being a niche product, this is not a phone that I can just easily recommend to everyone. Even though I also have to say that this is not just for the gamer. Therefore, it's just way too good of a multimedia consumption device, where the 120 Hz will maybe help less than just the sheer size of this display. The speaker performance definitely won't hold it back, even though there was a little bit of distortion. We get top-notch performance, very good battery life, software, and even a pretty decent camera, which makes this a pretty, I would actually have to say, total package. A very expensive one, yes, but once the price falls, it will be quite an appealing one. And therefore, I don't quite get the reviewers that say this is a great gaming phone, but not really a great phone. Because if I just look at the attributes, display, speakers, performance, battery life, software, and even the camera know to deliver. I mean, obviously, I would also wish for it to be a little bit more hand-friendly, maybe a little bit smaller, maybe less blocky. But that's just me. What it is supposed to do, it actually does really good. And also, being a phone, I mean, yeah. So let me know what you think about it, and yeah, down there. Okay, until next time, bye.